The HFY Dominion hung in space like a predatory whale, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Commander Zekmoth studied the tactical display with 3 of his 4 eyes, the 4th scanning for threats that never came. The HFY had ruled this sector for 800 cycles, and nothing challenged their supremacy. "Commander," Navigation Officer Yultak announced, his voice carrying the electronic undertones of their species' natural clicking language. "We have detected a vessel at the edge of sensor range. Configuration unknown." Zekmoth's mandibles clicked with interest. Unknown vessels were rare in HFY space, especially this deep in their territory. "Analysis. The ship appears to be of human origin," Yultak continued, his tentacles dancing across a control interface. "Approximately 300 meters in length, minimal energy signature. The vessel shows signs of significant damage." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Humans were the newest species to enter galactic politics, having achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 cycles ago. Most civilizations dismissed them as primitive, barely evolved primates clinging to their small corner of the galaxy. Zekmoth had read the intelligence reports. Humans were physically weak compared to the HFY, with their soft skin and single heart. They had no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They were pack hunters on their homeworld, but that meant little in the vast emptiness of space where technology determined survival. "Bring us closer," Zekmoth ordered. "Full tactical alert. Even wounded animals can bite." The Dominion moved through space with the fluid grace of a creature born to hunt. As they approached, the human vessel resolved on the main screen. It was smaller than Zekmoth had expected, its hull scarred and blackened by what appeared to be recent weapons fire. Parts of the ship's exterior were completely missing, revealing twisted metal and darkened corridors within. "Life signs," Zekmoth asked. "Confirmed. 37 humans aboard," Sensor Officer Kilvek reported. "Their power core is operating at 12% capacity. Engines are offline. They appear to be drifting." Zekmoth's secondary brain, the one that handled tactical analysis, began processing possibilities. A damaged human vessel, helpless and alone, presented an opportunity. The HFY High Command had been curious about human capabilities ever since first contact. Here was a chance to study them up close. "Tactical assessment," he commanded. "The vessel appears to be a cargo transport," Weapons Officer Mordak announced. "Minimal armament. 2 point defense turrets, both showing damage. No threat to the Dominion." Communication attempts. "The humans are broadcasting a distress signal on multiple frequencies," Communications Officer Silresh reported. "Standard galactic protocols. They are requesting assistance." Zekmoth's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. How perfectly human to ask for help from the very species that dominated this region of space. Their intelligence reports had suggested humans were naive about galactic politics, but this exceeded even his expectations. "Bring them aboard," Zekmoth decided. "Deploy tractor beams. I want that ship secured in Base 7. "Commander," Yultak interrupted carefully, "shall I alert the Science Division? They have expressed interest in human specimens." "Yes," Zekmoth replied, "but I want some of them kept alive for interrogation. The High Command will want to know how they ended up in our territory." The Dominion's tractor beams reached out like invisible claws, grasping the human vessel and drawing it slowly toward the massive docking bay. Zekmoth watched the process with satisfaction. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong took what they needed from the weak. As the human ship disappeared into the docking bay, Zekmoth began planning the interrogation. Humans were supposedly emotional creatures, driven by bonds they called family and friendship. Such attachment were weakness in his view, but there could be useful leverage. "Security teams to Base 7, he announced. "Full battle armor. I want those humans secured and separated for processing." "Commander," Silresh spoke up, "the human distress signal has stopped." "Of course it has. They are safe now." Zekmoth's mandibles clicked again, though perhaps not in the way they expected. The bridge crew shared what passed for laughter among the HFY, a sound like grinding metal. They had captured dozens of species over the centuries, and the process was always the same. Initial resistance, followed by acceptance, followed by useful cooperation or disposal. Through the viewports, Zekmov could see the lights of the captured human vessel dimming as his engineers began the process of cutting into its hull. Soon, they would have their specimens, their intelligence, and their answers. What the Kefar commander couldn't see was a small device that had been quietly transmitting from the human ship since the moment they had first appeared on sensors. A device that looked like nothing more than a damaged power coupling, but which had been sending a very specific signal to a very specific location. The human crew was already moving through their ship with purpose, no longer the helpless victims they had appeared to be. Captain Sarah Chen looked at her chronometer and smiled grimly. 12 hours, she whispered to her first officer. Right on schedule. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her back against the bulkhead and listened to the sound of plasma cutters eating through her ship's hull. The Wanderer's Hope had been her home for 6 years, and now aliens were carving it apart like a piece of meat. She pushed down the anger and focused on the mission. Status report, she whispered into her comm unit. Hull breach in 17 minutes, replied Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her chief engineer. They are being methodical about it. Professional. Rodriguez. Explosives are in place, came the voice of a demolitions expert. But Sarah, I have to ask again, are you sure about this? Chen closed her eyes. She had asked herself the same question every day for the past 3 months. We knew the risks when we volunteered. All of us. The plan had been born in the ashes of the Proxima Colony massacre. The Kefar had descended on the agricultural world like a plague, killing 90,000 humans in what they called a resource acquisition operation. The survivors' testimonies had been clear. The aliens viewed humans as little more than interesting specimens to be studied and exploited. Traditional military response would take years to organize and might fail entirely. The Kefar had technology centuries ahead of humanity's, and their empire spanned dozens of star systems. But humans had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to fight a superior enemy was to make them think they had already won. Remember the Trojan horse, Chen murmured, thinking of the ancient Earth story that had inspired their mission. The Wanderer's Hope wasn't actually a cargo vessel. It was a heavily modified military transport, its holds packed with enough antimatter to vaporize a small moon. The 37 civilians aboard were all volunteer from Earth Special Forces, each one chosen for their willingness to die for the mission. The ship's damaged appearance was carefully crafted theater. The hull breaches were controlled, the power readings were falsified, and the distress signal was bait. For 3 months, they had traveled through Kefar space, allowing themselves to be detected and ignored by patrol ships until they reached their target. The sound of the plasma cutters stopped. Hull breach complete, Webb reported. They are sending in soldiers. Chen activated her helmet's tactical display. Through the ship's internal sensors, she could see the Kefar troops pouring into the lower decks. They were impressive creatures, standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating and multiple arms. Their weapons were sleek and efficient, clearly designed for close combat. Positions, Chen ordered. Her cool move with practiced precision. They had rehearsed the scenario hundreds of times in simulation, but the reality was different. The Kefar moved faster than expected, their alien coordination superior to human teamwork. Within minutes, they had secured the lower decks and were advancing toward the bridge. Captain called Sergeant Kim Park from her position near the main corridor. They are not using lethal force. Looks like they want prisoners. Chen smiled grimly. That was exactly what they had hoped for. The Kefar wanted to study humans, which meant they needed live specimens. It also meant they wouldn't be expecting serious resistance from what appeared to be helpless cargo haulers. Remember, Chen broadcast to her crew, we're scared civilian merchants. Act a part. The first Kefar soldiers to reach the bridge moved with the confidence of predators who had cornered their prey. Their leader, a massive creature with scars across his chitinous face, gestured with a weapon that looked like it could punch through battle armor. Humans, the alien said in heavily accented Standard Galactic, you will surrender now. Resistance will result in pain. Chen stepped forward, her hands raised in apparent surrender. She had practiced this moment, rehearsing the right mixture of fear and defiance. Please, we're just merchants. We got lost in a jump malfunction. We don't want any trouble. The Kefar leader's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. You are in Kefar space without authorization. You will be processed. Processed? Chen let genuine fear creep into her voice. What does that mean? Questions. Tests. Some of you will prove useful. Others will contribute to science. The casual way the alien spoke about human experimentation sent a chill down Chen's spine. These weren't just conquerors. They were predators who saw other species as resources to be exploited. Her resolve hardened. Take them. The leader ordered his soldiers. The Kefar moved efficiently, using restraints that looked more like medical equipment than shackles. They separated the humans into groups, clearly following some predetermined protocol. Chen found herself being escorted toward the airlock, along with what appeared to be the senior officers. As they walked, she activated a hidden transmitter in her uniform. The signal was brief and would appear to be nothing more than equipment malfunction to alien sensors. But somewhere in the depths of space, automated systems were receiving confirmation that Phase 1 was complete. The interior of the Kefar ship was a marvel of alien engineering. Corridors curved in impossible directions, following the natural geometry of the builders rather than human concepts of up and down. The walls were covered in a substance that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, and the air carried scents that spoke of distant worlds and alien evolution. Chen and her companions were escorted to what appeared to be a medical facility. The equipment was recognizable in function, if not form: scanners, restraints, instruments that clearly belonged in a laboratory rather than a hospital. "Fascinating," said a new voice. Chen turned to see a Kefar that was smaller than the soldiers but carried himself with obvious authority. "I am Science Director Veltar. I have been looking forward to studying your species." "We have rights under galactic law," Chen said, playing her role. "You can't just experiment on us." Veltar's mandibles clicked in what she now recognized as Kefar laughter. "Galactic law applies to recognized civilizations. Your species is still under evaluation." The alien began operating devices that hummed with energy. "We will begin with basic physiological scans. Please remain still. Movement will only increase the discomfort." Chen closed her eyes and thought of Proxima Colony, of the children who had died in alien experiments, of the message that had been sent to Earth about humanity's place in the galaxy. Soon, the Kefar would learn that humans had a message of their own to deliver. Dr. Veltar had dissected 17 different species in his career, but humans fascinated him more than any previous subject. Their biology was remarkably adaptable, their neural pathways surprisingly complex for such a primitive species. What intrigued him most was their emotional responses. Even under interrogation, they showed remarkable concern for their companions. Subject designation Human 7. He spoke into his recorder. Continues to resist standard interrogation techniques. Psychological profile suggests strong pack bonding behaviors. Recommend increasing leverage through threat to fellow humans. The human female strapped to his examination table, she had identified herself as Captain Sarah Chen, stared at him with eyes that held more hatred than fear. Most species broke quickly under Kefar interrogation, but these humans possess an unusual resilience. "Your crew manifest indicates you were carrying agricultural supplies to the Centauri system." Veltar continued his questioning. "Yet our scans show your cargo holds contain only standard shipping containers. Where are the supplies?" Chen's vital signs spiked, but she maintained her silence. Veltar injected her with a mild neural stimulant, enough to increase sensitivity without causing permanent damage. The Kefar had learned that live subject provided better data than corpses. "The stimulant will make the next phase more uncomfortable," Veltar explained clinically. "However, I can administer a neutralizing agent if you provide the information I require." "Go to hell," Chen whispered. Veltar's mandibles clicked with interest. He had observed similar defiance in other species, but usually only among their military castes. These humans claimed to be civilian merchants, yet they displayed the psychological profile of trained soldiers. "Commander Zekmov," Veltar spoke into his communicator, "I require additional leverage. Bring Human 15 to Laboratory 7. Within minutes, Kefar soldiers escorted another human into the chamber. This one appeared younger, with the lean build of someone who spent their life in zero gravity. His identification listed him as Marcus Webb, the ship's engineer. "Ms. Chen," Veltar said, "I will now begin extracting information from your engineer. The process will be painful for him, but entirely preventable if you cooperate." For the first time, Chen's composure cracked. "Marcus isn't part of this. He's just a kid." Then protect him. Veltar replied simply. Tell me about your true mission. The exchange confirmed Veltar's suspicions. These weren't simple merchants. They were part of some human intelligence operation. The question was whether they were spies, scouts, or something else entirely. Chen's breathing became rapid and shallow as she watched the soldiers secure Webb to a second examination table. The young engineer looked terrified, which was exactly the reaction Veltar had hoped for. Last chance, Veltar said, powering up a neural probe. The information you provide will determine how many of your crew survive the next hour. Chen closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Veltar was surprised to see not fear, but something that looked almost like pity. You really don't understand, do you? Chen said quietly. You think we're here because we got lost. You think we're victims who stumbled into your territory by accident. Explain. We didn't get lost, Doctor. We came here to find you. Veltar's secondary brain processed the implications of that statement. A human intelligence mission, deep in HFY space, using a disguised vessel. But for what purpose? Humans lacked the technology for effective reconnaissance, and their military was decades behind HFY capabilities. A spy mission, he concluded. You were gathering intelligence on our defenses. Chen's smile was cold. Not gathering intelligence. Delivering a message. Before Veltar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lighting bathed the laboratory in red, and the deck plates vibrated with the sound of massive explosions somewhere in the ship's depths. What's happening? Veltar demanded, activating a communicator. Laboratory 7, this is Commander Zekmov. We have multiple explosions in the lower decks. Unknown devices are detonating throughout the ship. Veltar stared at Chen, whose smile had become genuinely frightening. You brought explosives aboard. We brought more than explosives, Chen replied. We brought a promise. The ship shuddered as another explosion rocked the hull. Through the laboratory's viewports, Veltar could see fires burning in the corridors outside. Emergency containment fields were struggling to maintain atmosphere as sections of the ship vented into space. Impossible, Veltar muttered. Our security protocols would have detected any weapons. Your security protocols were designed to detect conventional weapons, Chen explained. They weren't designed to detect a ship that is itself a weapon. The full implications of her words hit Veltar like a physical blow. The human vessel wasn't just carrying explosives, it was packed with them. The entire ship was a massive bomb, and the HFY had pulled it into their own docking bay. You're going to destroy yourselves along with us, Veltar said, his voice carrying a note of respect for the first time. That was always the plan, Chen replied. Humans have a saying, remember the Alamo. It means that sometimes the only way to win is to make your enemy pay such a high price of victory that they think twice about fighting you again. Another explosion shook the ship, this one closer to the laboratory. Veltar could hear the sound of buckling metal and failing systems. The Dominion was a fortress, but even fortresses could be brought down from within. How many ships like yours are there? Veltar asked. Enough, Chen answered. Every major HFY installation in this sector is about to receive a visit from human merchants in distress. The laboratory's main display flickered and died. Emergency power was failing throughout the ship. In the distance, Veltar could hear the sound of HFY crew members shouting orders and trying to coordinate damage control. Your species is committing suicide, Veltar observed. You're throwing away lives for symbolic gesture. No, Chen corrected him. We're teaching the galaxy that humans aren't prey. We're showing every species that watches what happens here that humanity will go to any length to protect itself. The deck plates beneath them began to buckle. Somewhere in the ship's core, the antimatter containment system was starting to fail. Veltar realized that within minutes, the entire vessel will be consumed in a fusion reaction that will be visible from several star systems away. The other ships, he said desperately, warn them. Stop this madness. Chen's expression softened slightly. The other ships received their warning 3 months ago when you massacred Proxima Colony. They chose not to listen. As if summoned by her words, the ship's communication system crackled to life one final time. Through the static, Veltar could hear reports from across the sector, HFY installations going silent, Patrol fleets reporting mysterious explosions, and everywhere the same pattern of human ships appearing just before disaster struck. Message delivered, Chen whispered. Fleet Admiral Kethraz stood in the tactical center of the orbital fortress Eternal Dominion, watching his empire burn. The holographic display showed 17 red indicators across the sector, installations that had gone silent in the past 6 hours. Each one had been visited by a human vessel before the destruction began. Status report, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years commanding Kefar forces. Command Station Yilmoth, destroyed. Research Facility Zekpar, destroyed. Patrol Base Mordak, destroyed. The list continued, each name representing thousands of Kefar lives and decades of military investment. Survivors, minimal. The human vessels appeared to be carrying antimatter weapons of unprecedented yield. Complete vaporization in all cases. Kethraz's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Humans had achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 cycles ago. Their technology was primitive, their military pathetic by galactic standards. How had they developed weapons capable of destroying Kethar installations? Analysis of the attack pattern. Coordinated, replied Intelligence Director Silmoth. Each human vessel followed the same profile, damaged cargo ship broadcasting distress signals. Our commanders responded according to standard protocols for vessel recovery and prison acquisition. They were counting on our protocols, Kethraz realized. They knew we would bring them aboard. The tactical display updated with new information. 3 more installations had stopped responding to communication attempts. The pattern was spreading, moving deeper into Kethar space with each passing hour. So, Communication Officer Velthek announced, we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. Put it through. The holographic display shifted to show a human female in military uniform. She appeared middle-aged by their standards, with graying hair and eyes that held the weight of difficult decisions. According to the identification data, she was Admiral Rebecca Hayes, commanding officer of the Earth Defense Force. Admiral Kethraz, the human said, her voice carrying clearly across the light hues. I am speaking to you from Oath, representing the United Nations of Humanity. By the time you receive this message, Operation Trojan Horse will have been completed. Kethraz's secondary brain processed the implications. A coordinated military operation, planned and executed across multiple star systems. These weren't random acts of terrorism. They were surgical strikes designed to cripple Kethar capability in the region. Your forces have attacked 17 of our installations, Admiral Hayes continued. The casualties number in the hundreds of thousands. We consider this an act of war. War. Kethraz spoke to the recording, though he knew the human couldn't hear him. You've just declared war on an empire that spans 60 star systems. The volunteers who carried out these missions knew they wouldn't survive, Hayes said, as if answering his unspoken question. They died to send you a message that your species seems incapable of understanding through diplomatic channels. The transmission showed archived footage of the Proxima Colony massacre. Kethraz remembered the operation, a routine resource acquisition that had proceeded according to standard protocols. The humans had resisted. Casualties had been acceptable, and the colony's agricultural output had been integrated into the Kethar supply chain. You killed 90,000 civilians, Hayes continued. Children, families, people who had never raised a weapon against anyone. You called it resource acquisition. We call it genocide. It was standard procedure, Kethraz muttered. They were in territory we required. Your standard procedure ends now, Hayes said. Humanity is serving notice that we will no longer tolerate Kethar aggression against our colonies or our people. Any future attacks will be met with escalating responses. The holographic display shifted to show star charts. Kethraz was shocked to see the depth of human intelligence about Kethar military installations. They had detailed information about fleet positions, supply lines, and command structures that should have been impossible for their primitive technology to obtain. We know about your shipyards at Velmar, Hayes continued. We know about your research stations in the Outer Rim. We know about your command bunkers on Kethar Prime. We have been watching you for longer than you realize. Impossible, Silmoth whispered. Our counterintelligence would have detected human espionage operations. Not if they weren't looking for them, Kethraz realized. We dismissed humans as primitive. We never considered them a threat worth monitoring. The transmission continued with technical specifications that made Kethraz's blood run cold. Humans had developed antimatter weapons, stealth technology, and long-range reconnaissance capabilities that rivaled Kethvar science. More importantly, they had the will to use suicide tactics that most civilized species consider barbaric. You have 48 hours to withdraw all Kethvar forces from human-claimed territory, Hayes announced. Any military vessels found in our space after that deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. They are giving us an ultimatum, Kethraz said incredulously. A species that barely knows how to build starships is threatening the Kethvar Empire. Sir, Velfek interrupted. We're receiving priority communication from a high command. They are requesting immediate tactical assessment of human capabilities. Kethraz looked at the tactical display, where red indicators continued to multiply across the sector. In 6 hours, humans had inflicted more damage on Kethvar forces than any enemy had managed in the past century. They had done it with volunteers who knew they were going to die, using weapons that turned their own bodies into delivery systems. Admiral Hayes, he said to the recorded image, you've made your point. The transmission concluded with a final message that would haunt Kethraz for years to come. We don't want war with your empire. We want to be left alone. But if you force us to fight, we will show you that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology. It's our willingness to sacrifice everything for the people we love. The holographic display went dark, leaving Kethraz alone with his thoughts. The humans had achieved something no enemy had ever managed. They had made the Kethvar Empire afraid, not of their weapons or their technology, but of their complete disregard for their own survival when protecting their species. Orders, so. Silmoth asked quietly. Kethraz stared at the tactical display, where the red indicators continued to multiply. Somewhere in human space, more volunteers were probably preparing for similar missions. The thought of facing an enemy that considered death an acceptable cost of victory was genuinely terrifying. Contact the High Command, he said finally. Tell them we need to discuss new policies regarding human contact. For the first time in Kethraz's career, the Empire was going to negotiate rather than simply take what it wanted. 6 months after Operation Trojan Horse, the diplomatic chambers of Neutral Station Omega hosted the most important negotiation in galactic history. The station hung in the void between human and Kethvar space, its rotating sections designed to accommodate a dozen different species' environmental needs. Admiral Rebecca Hayes walked through corridors that had been carefully designed to avoid giving any species a psychological advantage. The walls were neutral gray. The lighting was adjusted to a spectrum comfortable for both human and Kethvar vision, and the artificial gravity was set to a compromise that made everyone equally uncomfortable. Admiral, said Captain James Morrison, her aide, the Kethvar delegation has arrived. Fleet Admiral Kethraz is leading their negotiating team. Hayes nodded, checking her reflection in a polished surface. The past 6 months had aged her considerably. Operation Trojan Horse had been a success beyond their wildest projections, but the cost had been enormous. 37 ships, over 1,000 volunteers, and the moral weight of launching the first human suicide attacks in space warfare. Any last-minute intelligence updates? Our sources indicate the Kethvar are genuinely interested in a peaceful resolution, Morrison replied. The attacks caused more damage than we estimated. They've pulled back from 3 entire sectors. Good. That means our people didn't die for nothing. The negotiating chamber was a marvel of diplomatic engineering. The table was circular, with no head or foot to indicate precedence. The chairs were designed to accommodate different body types and postural preferences. Translation systems had been tested and retested to ensure that no nuance would be lost in complex discussions ahead. Fleet Admiral Kethraz entered with a delegation of 12, including military advisors, scientists, and what appeared to be political representatives. The Kethvar leader was an impressive figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with the scarred carapace of a veteran warrior. His 4 eyes studied Hayes with what she had learned to recognize as respectful assessment. Admiral Hayes, Kethraz said, his voice carrying the clicking undertones of his species' language. I admit I did not expect to be meeting with humans under these circumstances. Nor did I, Hayes replied. But here we are. The negotiations began with formal protocols that had been agreed upon in advance. Each side presented their position, outlined their non-negotiable demands, and established a framework for discussion. Hayes had spent months preparing for this moment, studying Kefar psychology and cultural patterns. The Kefar Empire has existed for over 8 centuries. Kethraz began. We have maintained peace through strength, ensuring that aggressive species do not threaten galactic stability. Your attacks have disrupted that stability. Our attacks were responses to your massacre of Proxima Colony, Hayes replied calmly. 90,000 civilians died in what you called a resource acquisition operation. We call it genocide. Your species occupied territory that we required for expansion. Standard protocols were followed. Standard protocols involved the systematic murder of non-combatants. The conversation continued for hours, each side presenting their grievances and justifications. Hayes had expected this phase of the negotiations. Both species needed to air their positions before any real progress could be made. What surprised her was the gradual shift in Kethraz's tone. The alien admiral began asking questions about human psychology, about the volunteers who had carried out the suicide missions, about the decision-making process that had led to Operation Trojan Horse. I have studied the tactical reports, Kethraz said during a break in formal negotiations. Your people knew they would die, yet they volunteered anyway. This is not rational behavior. Rationality is relative, Hayes replied. What seems irrational to you might be perfectly logical from a human perspective. Explain. Hayes considered her words carefully. Humans form emotional bonds that transcend individual survival. When you killed the people of Proxima Colony, you didn't just eliminate a military target. You murdered the families, friends, and loved ones of people throughout human space. That created a debt that could only be paid in blood. But the volunteers gained nothing from their sacrifice. They gained the knowledge that their deaths would protect other humans from suffering the same fate, that their sacrifice would send a message to the galaxy that humanity won't be victimized without consequence. Kethraz's mandibles clicked in what Hayes had learned indicated deep thought. Your species values abstract concepts more than individual survival. We value both. But when forced to choose, we'll sacrifice individuals to protect the group. It's how we survived on Earth, and it's how we'll survive in space. The formal negotiations resumed with a different atmosphere. Kethraz's questions became more focused on establishing boundaries and protocols rather than justifying past actions. Hayes realized that the Kefar were genuinely trying to understand how to coexist with a species that viewed death as an acceptable cost of war. What would prevent future incidents? Kethraz asked. Mutual respect, Hayes replied. Recognition that human space is sovereign territory. Agreement that disputes will be resolved through negotiation rather than force. And if other species threaten human colonies, then we'll negotiate with them, too. But we'll do it from a position of strength, knowing that the galaxy has seen what humans are willing to do to protect themselves. The final agreement took 3 days to hammer out. It established formal diplomatic relations between Oath and the Kefar Empire, created protocol for handling territorial disputes, and included provisions for mutual defense against external threats. Most importantly, it included a clause that would become known as a Proxima Doctrine. Any attack on human civilians would be considered an act of war subject to unlimited response. As Hayes signed the documents, she thought about the volunteers who had made this moment possible. Captain Sarah Chen and her crew, along with hundreds of others who had given their lives to prove that humanity wouldn't be pushed around by stronger species. Admiral, Kethraz said as they concluded the ceremony, I hope this marks the beginning of a long peace between our species. So do I, Hayes replied. But understand, this peace exists because you now know what war with humanity would cost. We'd rather be friends than enemies, but we're prepared to be either. Kethraz's mandibles clicked in what Hayes had learned was Kefar respect. Your species has taught the galaxy an important lesson. Strength isn't always measured in technology or numbers. Sometimes it's measured in the willingness to sacrifice everything for what you believe in. Hayes nodded, looking out at the stars visible through the station's viewports. Somewhere out there, human colonies were expanding into the galaxy, protected by the knowledge that their species would go to any length to defend them. The volunteers of Operation Trojan Horse had bought humanity a place among the stars with their lives. It was a price that would never be forgotten and never need to be paid again. The galaxy had learned to respect humanity not because of their technology or their military might, but because of their absolute refusal to accept defeat. In the end, that had proven to be humanity's greatest weapon, the knowledge that they would rather die fighting than live as victims. The message had been delivered, and the galaxy had listened.